I think we can get started because I'm very excited to hear from all our speakers today. So I'll be introducing the seminar. It's our fourth sustainability seminar this year, and the title is The Hidden Cost of Fashion. And this event really will explore both the current social and ecological problems created by fashion waste, and also some of the solutions. And I'll soon hand over to today's incredible moderators and speakers. But before that, I just wanted to remind you all of some ground rules. Please keep your mics off when you're not speaking. It's just because of the background noise. And obviously, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to type it in the chat or wait until the Q&A portion of the event. If you send something in the chat, we will be monitoring and compiling those questions to ask at the end. But you can also wait till the Q&A section if you prefer. And yeah, we are recording this session, both audio and visually, and it will be published on YouTube and internally at King's. So, make sure that you have your camera off if you don't want to be in the video. This seminar, it's really part of an open access interdisciplinary seminar series that aims to engage all of you with some of the biggest topics in the field. This one is obviously on fashion and waste. And we invite professional speakers to discuss subjects such as climate science, justice, sustainable agriculture, and so much more. So definitely stay tuned for our following seminars coming up throughout the year. The next one will be on climate migration and then on microplastics. And obviously this seminar is linked to our King's College London Keats online sustainability and climate module. It's actually a fully co-created and open access interdisciplinary module covering a whole range of topics from sustainable finance to social justice. If you haven't enrolled yet, we would encourage you to check it out. We'll share the link in the chat. This is only available to our students and staff at King's, but this sustainability seminar series is open to the public, so you can register. We'll also put the link in the chat, and obviously feel free to share this as widely as you like. We welcome everyone to join. And now for today's seminar, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our chair, Clarisse Mace, who's been an absolute superstar in terms of helping with the module. She's actually a King's alumni and volunteered creating the module itself, and is now a French environmental lawyer. Over to you, Clarisse.
Thank you, Rosa. We'll have 4 amazing speakers today. I'm going to introduce them just before they speak, and as we said, they will all each speak for 10-15 minutes, and then we have all the Q&A at the end, so leave your question in the chat. So our first speaker is Sam Quashie-Aiden. He's a multimedia skilled journalist with a background in law and investigative journalism. He's currently the head of news investigation at Greenpeace Africa, and he has authored a very important report on fast fashion and waste, titled Fast Fashion, Slow Poison, the Toxic Textile Crisis in Ghana. Over to you, Sam.
Great, thank you, Clarisse, and thanks everyone for joining. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see their presentation? Yeah, great. Great, so as Clarisse said, my name is Sam Quashie-Aiden, and I'm happy to kickstart of this conversation talking about the hidden cost of fast fashion. So as Clarisse mentioned, I am the head of investigations at Greenpeace Africa. I'm also an investigative journalist, and I also have a background in English and French law. And one thing about me, I've always been super excited and curious at looking at the intersection between fashion, social justice, and the environment. And most importantly, I'm just really happy to be here with you all. So thank you for taking some time from your Wednesday afternoon to be here with us. So I've got a couple polls kind of sprinkled throughout the presentation. But the first question I have for you is, where do you think this picture was taken? So feel free to just drop a comment in the chat. Do you think it's Senegal? Do you think it's Ghana? Could it be Kenya? I'm giving you 10 seconds because I only have 15 minutes to present all my findings. But yeah, curious to know your thoughts on this. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Great. So the answer is, drum roll, it's actually Ghana. So this is a picture from Ghana. This is the country that I'm also from. So this research and case study just has felt really personal to me. So I'm really excited to be sharing the findings and discussing it further. So moving on to the structure of the presentation, we're going to start off with just a brief context on the waste crisis. And then we'll focus, the majority of the presentation will be focused on the Greenpeace Africa report that I authored, and we'll talk about Kantamanto market, the research that we did. We'll talk a bit about trade data as well, and we'll finish off with discussing environmental impacts and human health impacts as well. And we'll have a couple polls just to keep things exciting and engaging as well. But to kickstart off, I think it's important to discuss fashion. And I really feel like over time, fashion has really evolved from being a form of self-expression to now being a machine of mass consumption, right? I think we're in a system now that's really focused on speed, clothes with reduced lifespans, and also clothes that are increasingly cheap. And so the last 2 decades have really seen the explosive rise of fast fashion. We're seeing global sales of clothing having nearly doubled from $1 trillion in 2002 to just under $2 trillion in 2023. And so when we look at consumers today, I think it's fair to say that we really have a never-ending choice of new styles, from up to like 52 micro collections a year from some of the biggest fast fashion brands to companies like Shein literally uploading 6,000 new articles online on a daily basis. And so when we look at the waste crisis that we're in right now, I think it's fair to say that the more we consume, the less we actually feel. And as we buy more, we also forget the true value of the garments that we wear. And in doing so, we really compromise both people and the environment, the planet. And so fast fashion has really created a cycle, right? Where the less we care, the more we consume. And this is the exact toxic fast fashion cycle that we need to break. And we really do that by reconnecting with the value of what we buy and also choosing sustainability over constant reinvention. And so moving on to the report that I authored alongside my dear Greenpeace colleagues, it's a title. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to try and say it without butchering the title. But it's called Fast Fashion, Slow Poison, the Toxic Textile Crisis in Ghana. And this is a report that we released only a couple months ago in September. And it involved 11 months of research, and its primary focus is Accra, Ghana. And so this is the team that I worked with for the research specifically. I call us the dream team because we really worked so well together, and we were also passionate about this issue and really uncovering the questions that we had around the state of Ghana's environment. So we had campaigners, we had investigative journalists, we had scientists, we had videographers, photographers, and we really accomplished some really great work together. So moving on, I think it's fair to say that fast fashion is at the root of an environmental and public health disaster that is unfolding in Accra, Ghana. And this is really as a result of increasing volumes of exports from the global north of discarded clothing, mainly secondhand clothes. And so the purpose of today's conversation will really be exploring the environmental and social costs of fast fashion using Ghana as our main case study. But I've also done past investigations around similar issues in Cambodia, and that's things we can discuss in the Q&A, or you can reach out to me at a later date for me to share more information on that. But to provide some context, so before doing the research, we already knew that Ghana was a big hub for receiving secondhand clothes. And every week, approximately 1,500 tons of secondhand clothes are received in Kantamanto, which is Ghana's largest secondhand clothing market. And much of this is then re-exported to other West African countries and other parts of Ghana as well. And despite Kantamanto having a thriving business or thriving businesses that actually repair and repurpose secondhand clothes, these large volumes mean that every week we're still seeing about 500,000 items of clothing waste from Kantamanto ending up in Ghana's open spaces. And nearly half of these clothes are of poor quality, and many are made from synthetic fibers, including polyester, nylon, acrylic, and most importantly, most of these clothes don't even have any resale value. So it's hard to sell them on in the market because they're essentially waste. And so Kantamanto market, this is a picture of Kantamanto from the outside from a bird's eye view. And for us at Greenpeace Africa, we really wanted to document the fate of the fashion waste once they are thrown away by stallholders. And while we're talking about Kantamanto Market, it's important for me to say that honestly, the year started off very, very sad with some devastating news because the market caught fire on the night of January 1st of this year. And now 2/3 of the market is gone, it's been burnt down. And so now we're in a state where thousands of traders and stallholders have been affected. And so there's a lot of relief efforts on the ground and fundraising happening to build Kantamanto Market back up so it can continue being a pillar to local communities. But I'm going to continue with the research that we did there last year. And so these are images of Kantamanto Market during our research trip last year. And you can see it's a very vibrant place. There's a lot happening. There's, yeah, thousands of individuals working there, and it has about 5,000 shops. And so what happens, you have like stallholders who will basically buy what we call bales of clothing. So these are clothes that are shipped from the global north and with the hopes that they can then sell them on in the market. And formerly, Kantamanto was known for its good quality secondhand items from the West, but our research confirmed that imports of used clothes in recent times really contained increasing quantities of poor quality items and overproduced fast fashion. And there was a recent survey 2 years ago where 370 retailers in the market were surveyed, and the amount of textile waste of newly imported bales was on average 5%, less than 5% in that original survey. But when we went to do our own research, we found that stallholders, reported that as much as 60% of used clothes in these bales that they were buying had clothes that were just unsellable. So 60% of those used clothes were unsellable and described as bola, which is the Ghanaian term for waste. So they couldn't really be sold. And so stallholders have seen a shift in the quality of the bales that they're receiving over the last 5 to 6 years. And many of them have said, the quality of clothes is unsellable because it's of poor condition. It's, has holes, it's old fashioned. People don't really, it's essentially waste. And I've actually witnessed some of the bale openings where I even witnessed winter jackets, winter hats, beanies, winter gloves. And these are clothes that are not suitable for Ghana's weather, so no one is going to be wearing them. So it was really sad to really see Ghana be seen as a dumping ground. And, this is really waste colonialism at its core. But moving on to some trade data, top exporters are the USA, China, Germany, and the UK. And then when it pertains to Ghana, data from 2019 shows that Ghana is actually the second biggest final destination of European used clothes by volume after Tunisia. And from the point of view of Ghana, the leading exporters between 2018 and 2022 were the Far East. So that's a focus on China and South Korea, followed by the UK, Europe, and North America. So that's just some data to visualize this. Moving on to the dumping sites, I really want people to see that we're dealing with mountains of clothes. So this is one of the sites the dumps that we visited, and it really prompted us to do some research. We wanted to collect garments and really test them. We had this infrared machine that allowed us to scan items of clothing, and the machine would tell us exactly what was made, what those items were made of. And almost all, so there was 89% of the clothes that we tested and scanned contained fossil fuel-based synthetic fibers, which will eventually break down into microplastics. For anyone familiar with the work of Greenpeace, you might know we love actions. We like to make statements. And so we basically had worked with our colleagues at Greenpeace Germany, where we had a 20-foot container. And because we knew so much waste was generated at Kantamanto Market, we worked with market stallholders to collect all the waste, about a week's worth of waste, and we were able to fill the container with, around 19,000 items of clothing waste, and we basically shipped it back to Germany, and our colleagues in Germany displayed those clothes at Berlin Fashion Week last year, which was quite a statement moment. So out of the container that we filled up with clothes, I wanted to know from you, what do you think was the top fast fashion brand we identified in the fashion waste that we collected from Kantamanto markets? So I put in 3 options. Could it be H&M? Could it be Zara? Could it be Shein? I'll leave you to drop your thoughts. Okay, time is ticking, so I'll make it quick. Yeah, the answer is H&M. H&M was the top brand that we identified within the container, but you can see other famous brands on the list like M&S, Next, Zara, Shein is further down, River Island, and so this is just to show that so many brands are part of this problem, and they all have work to do when it comes to making the clothes more sustainable. Moving on to Jamestown Beach, we did a lot of research there, and we really wanted to do some satellite imagery just to see how Jamestown Beach got to where it's at. So in 2010, you can see that the beach is quite pristine and clean, and by the time we reach 2023, and now it's looking completely different. And so you might wonder, how did the textile waste get to the beach? How did the beach end up like this? And it's important to point out that a lot of the dump sites are located near water bodies, near rivers and lagoons. And so when we have heavy rains, the accumulated waste basically gets released into the lagoon and washes out to sea. And the ocean current then deposits some of this textile waste onto the beaches and other areas. And obviously, these clothes are made of a lot of plastic, so they will eventually be degrading into microplastics, and this is bad for sediment, it's bad for the ocean, and it's bad for our marine food webs. If you have other questions regarding how fishing communities are impacted, I'm happy to discuss that as well during the Q&A. And then moving on to human costs, we found throughout the research that a significant volume of textile waste was being collected from the market and also burned for fuel to boil hot water in public wash houses, so bath houses where people would shower. And we did some air sampling in an area called Olfadama, and we found 3 bathhouses we wanted to test to kind of see the levels of exposure that people, what are people breathing if textile with plastic is being burned to fuel hot water in that environment. And ultimately, I want people to know that fast fashion is not just an environmental issue, but it's also a social justice issue as well. And so when it comes to the data that we collected and the scientific research from the testing, we found benzene, which is a carcinogenic substance, at levels that far exceed a lot of European ministry guidelines for indoor air quality. So benzene in one of the wash houses was 200 times higher than the actual guide value recommended by European countries. We found styrene, which is toxic to human reproduction. We found PAHs, which are polyaromatic hydrocarbons, some of which are carcinogenic with chronic exposure. We found phenol, which is mutagenic, so it causes mutations, and VOC levels at levels that require immediate attention. And so this is my last slide. I tried to fit everything in 15 minutes, but I really want people to know that waste colonialism is very devastating. And it's a serious concern for all of us, but to also remind people that it's only one side of the story, right? So there's supply chain, the whole supply chain behind fast fashion is just as damaging, from toxic chemicals and massive carbon footprints to also worker exploitation. The damage is really widespread. And so to fix this, we need stronger laws, like extended producer responsibility and also stricter supply chain regulations to really ensure that brands are accountable for every step from production to disposal. So that's it from me. I've kept my details here, so feel free to message me, email me, or also share any questions you have for me in the Q&A. And I'll pass it on to Clarisse. Back to Clarisse. Back to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sam, for this quite depressing but interesting presentation. I'll head over now to Byung-Do Kim. He's a research associate at the Center for Sustainable Business at King's Business School. His research focuses on how consumers understand sustainability and implement it in their daily choices, as well as how different framing of sustainable consumption solutions influence public perception and action. So this is our role in this, and how we as consumer can change it. Okay, you can take over the slides.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move into my slides. Okay, just one second. Is it working?
Yeah.
So okay, great. Everyone can see my slides. Very good. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Byung-Do Kim, and today I'll be discussing an important topic: understanding the barriers that consumers face when it comes to reducing fast fashion consumption. So fast fashion is a complex issue deeply tied to sustainability, ethics, and customer behavior. And I think there's a consensus that fast fashion is having a devastating impact on the planet. That's pretty undeniable at this point. But here's the thing. Why is it so hard to break away from fast fashion? Like, what I really want to know, what I really want to talk about today is the psychological and cognitive barriers that keep us hooked on fast fashions. So what's going on in our minds that makes it so tough to break free from this cycle? First, we only have so much mental bandwidth, like when we are making decisions. So picture this. So you are in a fast fashion store. You are surrounded by all these choices. What would come to your mind? Like, think about the last time when you were shopping for clothes. Probably, how those clothes look on you and how much they cost. Does it fit? Is it comfortable? Do I like the style? That sort of things, right? So you are more likely to focus on the immediate things. On the other hand, sustainability often takes a backseat. So we see the price tag, but we don't ask questions like how much water was used, what dyes were applied, and where they were manufactured, how they got to the store, such questions. We don't ask those questions. And even if you are given all this information, for example, like the environmental impact of a pair of jeans, like you can see on the slide, even if you have this information, it's just not realistic to process everything because you didn't go to the store to think about these things, right? You went to store to buy clothes, and therefore we selectively allocate our attention and focus. There's nothing wrong with this, by the way. It's natural to care about immediate things that matter to you, but this does highlight how easy it is to overlook the bigger picture at the time of purchase. And next is clothing. Clothing sustainability information is way more complex than most of us realize. So take a look at the image on the right-hand side. It shows how the fashion/garment supply chain contributes to household greenhouse gas emissions. So on the left hand, you will see greenhouse gas contribution related to your clothing, the production of your clothing, and the right-hand side covers the emissions from other fabric or garments we use at home. So it's tangled. It's very tangled web, and this even this is a simplified version. So one big issue here is the lack of transparency in the supply chain. Retailers might know their direct suppliers or the factory where clothes are cut and sewn, but that's usually where the knowledge stops. So they often don't know the details about where and how accessories like buttons and zippers, for example, how these accessories are made and made. So even with all the checks and certifications in place, the supply chain is so complex that it's hard to guarantee that every stage of production is completely clean or ethical. Next, I'd like to point out that people don't always understand the sustainability information they are given. So let's talk a bit about how consumers understand or don't understand sustainability. So there's been a lot of research on how well people grasp numbers tied to sustainability. So for example, this study by Camilleri and colleagues looked at greenhouse gas emissions from different appliance and food items in people's homes. They measure the actual emissions, then ask people to estimate those emissions. Now, if you look at this graph on the bottom axis shows the actual greenhouse gas emissions, and the side axis shows the people's estimates. So the diagonal line represents perfect accuracy of estimation, right? But
Can you go
here,
downstairs to have a look at the cabinet?
but here's the catch. The study found that people consistently underestimate the greenhouse gas emissions of both appliances and food. As you can see here, they are not even close to the actual numbers in most cases, except for a few small appliances. These are not fashion items, but the reason that I'm bringing this up is that while we don't have similar research on clothing or fashion items, I think the pattern would be very similar. I anticipate that. Consumers are likely underestimating the environmental impact of their fashion choices, which tells that our understanding can be very limited. And now let's take a look at this figure. So what this figure tells is that the impact of fast fashion is globe-wide. It's all over the world, like Sam just told. And here's the thing: pollution and its consequences often occur in geographically distant places, which also affects our psychological distance perception. So you feel like they are happening somewhere far away, far away. It is true they are geographically happens far away, but you also feel it happens far away. And when you feel like they are happening somewhere far away, the problem is when we see it as distant, something happening, out there, not here, we tend to think about them in very abstract terms. This is called control level theory, because it's not happening to you right now, or not in your neighborhood. You feel abstract about that. And when something feels abstract like that, it rarely creates a sense of urgency or personal connection. And without that sense of urgency, it's tough for people to take meaningful action, like cutting back on fast fashion. So it stays as that big distant issue in our perception instead of feeling like something we could do something about, right here, right now. So to sum it up, when we tend to give limited attention to addressing fast fashion because we selectively allocate our attention. Clothing sustainability information is very difficult to process. And even with the information, we tend to underestimate its significance. And most impacts feel very abstract. So what do we do then? What do we do instead? We rely on shortcuts. So what we call heuristics. So in this case, they are environmental cues. And these environmental cues come in a few different forms. Sometimes it's certified eco labels, or sometimes non-certified eco labels, which often can be categorized as greenwashing. And sometimes it's company or brand claims. Think about Patagonia, for example. They lean into their identity by telling us all the ways they tackle environmental and social issues, right? Sometimes it's sustainability marketing promotions or programs. Like I'm sure you've probably seen or heard stuff like, bring us your old clothes. We're gonna store, reuse, resell, or recycle them, right? It's a good plan, sounds great. But well, I'm not saying these are inherently bad things, but here's where it gets tricky. When people zero in on these environmental cues, it's super easy to make illogical judgments. Here's an example of illogical judgments. So imagine petrol cars. If you compare one petrol car to two petrol cars, it's obvious. I mean, the total environmental impact of the two car is greater than one car, right? It's no-brainer. But when it comes to hybrid cars, which are marketed as eco-friendlier, people often assume two hybrid cars have the same impact as one hybrid car, which doesn't make any sense, because even for green cars, even for hybrid cars, electric cars, two cars should have greater impact than one car, right? But that's how our brain shortcuts when it sees eco-friendly or hybrid. So what this tells us in our fast fashion context is when we rely on too heavily on these environmental cues provided by fast fashion brands, we might risk giving too much of undeserved credit to those brands. And related to this notion, there's this concept called moral licensing. It's basically this idea that when we do something good, it gives us permission to do something bad. So in the context of fast fashion, when we recycle our clothes or buy eco-certified clothes, it can make us feel like we've done our part for the environment, which can lead us to consume more. And the research also supports this. So recent research shows that recycling promotions of fast fashion brands can reduce customers' guilt, and that may lead to 4% more purchases overall. So these closed take-back programs, although it's well-intentioned, it can actually end up fueling more consumption. This author, you can see here, this author also highlights, that when sustainable products, sustainable clothes are marketed as guilt-free and priced competitively, as cheap as fast fashion, especially the eco-conscious group is predicted to buy about 19% more clothing, because this particular segment of consumers already prioritizes sustainability, and they are interested in reducing guilt about their fashion choices. So all in all, sustainable marketing of fast fashion may come with a downside, which is higher overall consumption. That's a bit of a paradox, actually, because it can actually undermine the sustainability goals that we are aiming for. So, knowing all this, what can we actually do to break free from psychological traps and make more sustainable choices? The first step, I think, is to simply, remember those psychological traps we talked about, like moral licensing and reliance on heuristics and stuff. At its core, I personally think it all comes down to, something we were taught as children. Like, just because a brand promotes recycling or uses some organic materials, it doesn't give us a free pass to buy more than we need. And second, be mindful. One really practical tip can be implementing a cooling off period when you are shopping. And you can ask yourself, do I really need this? Do I still want it? Will I still want it in a week? Or does it align with my values? That kind of questions. So basically give yourself some space to make more informed, rational decisions. If you want to convince other people too, try to visualize the impact of choices, like try to connect with the real world consequences of fast fashion. Reducing the psychological distance is really important, because it's not just about knowing the facts. We don't remember, they don't come to our attention, but it's about feeling those facts. So reducing the distance is important. And last but not least, remember that you are not alone in this journey. So there's a growing community of people out there trying to make conscious choices, including the amazing efforts led by our guest speakers today. And governments, and also governments are getting involved too. So for example, did you know that French government now covers the cost of repairing clothing and shoes? I didn't know, but this program just started in October 2023 to help reduce textile waste, and it's still pretty new. So I don't know. I don't think I can tell how big of an impact it's having yet, but it's definitely a step in the right direction to tackle the fast fashion problem. So why not start by looking around and joining a movement near you? Speaking of which, there's something exciting coming up. I think Rosa will tell you later. Next week, King's Climate and Sustainability is hosting a closed swap event. I think it'll be a really meaningful way to get involved. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Kim. Yeah, we'll tell you a bit more about the closed swap at the end and how we can really take action on that. Now we'll hear from Rupa Ganguly, who is the founder and CEO of Inclusive Trade. Rupa's mission is to build an ethical ecosystem by enabling technology for sustainability in trade. They are one of the 4 Small Business Champion awardees, globally recognized for their innovative solution. Rupa?
Hi, thanks so much for that. Can you hear me? Perfect. So can you see the slide? I'm not sure if I'm showing the right slide. Okay.
Yeah,
I can only see it in an overview. Is that good?
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, brilliant. I will need to just somehow enlarge this though. Do I just click on the grid view? Is that what I'm supposed to click on?
We can see the slides. You can control them now, I think. You can...
Oh, hang on. Just give me 1 second. I seem to have lost control of the screen over here for some reason. So I can't see it. I mean, I do know what I'm going to say, but I actually can't see the slide. So I'm just trying to see how I can see
there
the
should
slide.
be an option for presenter mode or not presenter mode. There's like 3 little dots at the bottom of the screen you're seeing. You should see the notes section and the small screen.
Yeah, there should be. I'm just trying to figure out where it's gone. This says hide presenter view. Is that what I'm doing then?
Do that and then you'll
Perfect. Here we go. I think I can see my slides now. Perfect. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an absolute joy to, in fact, share this platform with all of you, and hearing everything that you're saying. It's just, I'm learning so much, and actually every single thing you're saying resonates with so many things that I've been doing over the last 25 years, that actually just feels like different components all coming together and, you know, kind of weaving a story, if you like. So very quickly, a little bit about me. My background is international trade and development, but focused on the textiles and clothing industry. So I've worked at the UN, the United Nations Agency of the International Trade Center in Geneva, the WTO. Sounds all a bit boring in terms of what they do up there, but actually it's extremely exciting because you get to go into the field and really work hands-on with, you know, businesses and look at what's happening, and kind of looking at those pictures from Accra that you showed recently. I mean, for me, that's sort of the kind of things that I did over the last 2 decades of really going in and working and looking at what's happening on the field, understanding where the challenges are, because as you see, it's not a straightforward black and white answer. There's an industry normally that supports everything, or it supports, you know, so waste for some person is actually an opportunity for someone else. So quite recently, I would say that with my background in international trade and development, I have had the opportunity of also working very closely with small businesses and supporting them with their challenges. In fact, an interesting story is that before I went into the world of international trade and development, I actually started off as an entrepreneur myself in the wholesale markets of Mumbai, which is India, which is where I'm from. Strangely, working with leftover fabrics to develop a collection while I was at university. So it kind of goes back to the mid 90s, in fact. And at that time, it wasn't called sustainability. It was just called, being sensible about using waste so that you could make a profit margin. So, we all kind of repackage everything over the years. And, today, I think we're a bit more knowledgeable about the impacts that are happening, and there's a lot more conversation like the one that we're having today. So with that, I'm also really pleased to say that as of towards October, November last year, I've also joined as a senior associate at the Center for Sustainable Business at King's College. I was invited, and I am seriously excited to see what we're going to do together over this year. So with no further ado, let me go into what I'm going to be talking about. I think a lot of us have spoken about statistics, so I will spare you all the stats that I actually have over here with me. Having worked in trade, I do have a big sort of, barrage of statistics. We're happy to share that with you later on. But I think the important thing for us to understand is just the sort of enormity of the problem. Forget the real small details at the moment. But for you and me as consumers, what is so shocking is that only 1% of post-consumer waste is actually recycled. And that's a bit shocking because think about it. You think you do a lot every day. We kind of separate our things and we put stuff, but that's just 1% of textile. I'm talking about textile over here, is recycled. And you wonder, surely there has to be a bigger number. Worse, still more than 100 billion. We're literally burning money as we go along as well. While we're doing the planet no favors or humanity, we're actually burning money as well. So it's really worth thinking about it, even from an actual business and investment perspective, as to where is the opportunity for industry to actually evolve. Over 100 billion worth of textile waste is produced with millions of tons dumped. And as we saw some of those shocking photographs and images that you showed a bit earlier. Now, this is not just about the waste, but they're also harmful chemicals that these textiles give out, as we said. So in fact, the communities around these areas, whether that's your local backyard, which probably it isn't, and quite often it goes away to a different country, it is just not ruining, it's not just ruining the landfills, it's actually literally having an effect on people's lives and their ability to breathe as well around, because a lot of these old textiles happen to have toxic chemicals when regulations were actually not in play to manage the type of chemicals with which you could dye your fabrics. Today, thankfully, at least in the EU and the UK has continued to retain this. A lot of textiles today cannot enter this country, or what is produced here is regulated under certain agreements which protect us from very, very harmful carcinogenic chemicals, which otherwise were being utilized, prior to these agreements. One of them is called the REACH regulation, REACH, and I think that has changed a lot of how the industry today functions in terms of both the supply chain as well as the effect of chemicals. But it's not just about discarding stuff. What you think about is that if I just give you one statistic here, 60% of the cost of making what you're wearing, what most of you are wearing, comes from the raw materials or the textile. Okay, so it's not the garment sewing or the labor cost, it is actually the fabric or the raw material content, which makes up 60%. So can you imagine you are now discarding this sort of fabric or, wasted fabric or your garments, which could in fact have a profitable utilization into creating something new. Now, this isn't as simple as it sounds, obviously, because we today use blended fibers. We have a lot of problems in terms of just separating. But in theory, the idea is that, is there a way in which we can close this loop? Is there a way in which we can actually start thinking, if 60% of the cost of making what you're wearing today comes from the raw material and content, is there not a way to use waste in a way that it could be profitable, right? And the interesting thing is that the textile industry isn't sitting and kind of just twiddling their thumbs. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around this. Whether you look at the policy level or you look at big industry today, everyone is seeking solutions. So first and foremost, I'd like you to think at this stage, or at least put it down over there in terms of what do you do to help circularity? Okay, you don't have to answer this right now. You can put it in a chat if you want, but this is more for you to think about and share with your communities, with your friends, with your families, and of course, share it with us as well if you can. And I would very much like to hear your thoughts. If you want to just jot it down and put it on our Instagram, that's the best way to connect with us. But I would love to hear different things that everyone is doing with your little bits about circularity. Going forward, let me tell you what I am doing now. This was all about my background and a little bit about, what the world is up to today. But what am I doing and what are we doing as a company? Let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So having really spent a lot of time, as I said, over the last 2 decades, working with small businesses and factories in the garment sector and the textile industry in Latin America, so places like Guatemala, or in Africa, in Ethiopia, or for that matter, in Asia, in Cambodia, as well as in Myanmar, or like lots of different places, India, Sri Lanka, what became very apparent is that actually, when you think about the textile industry, you start thinking about these big retailers and these big brands. But in fact, what's really interesting is that this is a very fragmented industry with many, 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 many small components attached to it. And what does that mean? These small components are very small industries in themselves. So it boils down to really trying to solve a problem for small businesses rather than trying to attack a large problem, which of course large industries do have the resources and often the connections and networks to do. But the small businesses really who are the thread makers or the ones who are kind of, sewing little components, or for that matter, actually creating parts of fabrics in different countries, or for that matter, harvesting a small acre of crop. Now, how do you solve the problem for these? And oftentimes they actually are doing some really interesting things and having a positive impact on their communities. So if you think about it globally, 90%, and this is a real statistic, 90% of businesses globally are small businesses. And it's not as straightforward because all small businesses are different by nature. Just because we are small, you're also flexible, agile, and you kind of take different turns and use different opportunities to make it work for you. But the idea at the end of the day is that there are some commonalities as well, such as not having economies of scale, such as not having large departments, or not having the ability to really invest in those expensive certifications or evidencing tools, which could in fact support transparency. And what that does is often leaves them out of the chain, or leaves them in a situation where they're not able to really see the best benefit or being able to reach the type of consumers like you and me who do give communities or give sort of sustainability a lot of value. So inclusive trade was really born out of the need to give these small businesses a voice and help them really make a solution viable for them in a cost-effective manner to be able to show what their impact is and what they're doing. Often they wouldn't be certified, but they actually do some really amazing things. And very soon I will show you an example of it. But what we started doing, if you look at our platform, is actually started collecting data, and we've been doing this now for about 7 years, collecting data, looking at how they have an impact at the local level, starting to look at what kind of how local communities are actually evolving and how they started seeing waste and what changes they started making. And we linked all of these back to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. If you haven't heard of them, I highly recommend look at the SDGs, because it does give you a bit of a general broad framework of understanding the different elements of how we want to try and reduce poverty, address climate change, kind of equalize gender equality, if you like. And really, at the end of the day, I think the most important one, if nothing else, is SDG 12, which is responsible production and consumption. And if all of us even have a tiny bit that we want to do ourselves, that would, I think, have a huge impact. Let me show you a little case or an example of what we did. And this was the reason I've picked this one particularly, is for 2 reasons. This was literally why inclusive trade became an entity. This is where we saw that a small business can actually have a large impact. And also, interestingly, it took me back to those days when I was, kind of picking up leftover fabrics in a shop, in a wholesale market in India, and realized that actually one small business can have such a large impact. So the company I'm talking about really, it's called the New Denim Project. And interestingly, this company is based in Guatemala. And in fact, the original company's goal dates back to 1956, which is basically a textile mill, right? So they would just sort of get in, and it's a whole sort of, they had the full composite structure. So they kind of had the ability to weave fabric, to make garments and to sell garments. What was interesting, obviously, was that they couldn't keep up with, low prices coming in from Asia, from Brazil, other places, in terms of being able to be profitable. Now, the granddaughter, this is the third generation, this lovely girl, Ariana, came into the picture and said she'd gone away and studied abroad. And she came into the picture and said, well, actually, do you know, there's a denim factory right next door that makes denim jeans. And at the same time, they have a lot of waste, which is mainly cotton, right? So is there a way in which we could actually take that denim, those offcuts, if you like, when you make a pair of jeans, you will find lots of waste because it's the shape of your body, right? And whereas fabrics don't come in those shapes yet, unless it's 3D manufactured. That's a whole different discussion. And so those offcuts were, and coming back to that concept of using waste as raw material, she did some maths and she was like, well, we're buying the cotton. Why can't we use this and make it back into fiber using our machines that we anyway have, and then start spinning it back into yarn to then weave it back into fabric or knit it back into, yarn or fabric as well. So she started the project, and the interesting thing is that I was involved in the very starting of this conversation back in 2013 when this started to take effect. And the very first time they created some samples and we said, what can we do? What's the sort of, can we actually create a fabric out of this? And it's a very small factory, mind you. This is not a massive factory. This is a very small factory. But in these little effects that they've kind of put in place in their local community, they have not just reduced waste, and I've actually got some actual information from there. Not only have they reduced waste, but they've now become 100% sustainable eco-cotton. They now create eco-cotton yarn fabrics with no polyester, no nylon, no acrylic, right? Their partnerships are with some of the biggest businesses in the world today, and they've managed to train bigger businesses to understand that you should actually consider looking at smaller companies that are doing ethical things. Now, the reason for this particular example that I said again is not just to talk about this particular factory, but the idea that in fact, no idea is too small, right? Imagine they were going to shut this textile mill down because it wasn't able to compete with the likes of India, China, and Brazil. But instead, what they did is they turned this around into a circular loop instead of the linear loop, that linear methodology that we currently have in our garment production, and created a community over there which started to understand the benefits of waste management, understand the benefits of how beautiful products, not just unaffordable, fancy things, but actually beautiful products for everyday use, whether it's a tote bag, whether it's a pair of jeans, whether it's something can be made from waste if you have the right partnerships and collaboration. And I think that's exactly what I want to kind of comment on, is that it's not for one person or one level. We have, of course, the problem of waste is not a simple problem. Apparently today, in today's world, I think I have a statistic that we say consumers today own 300% more items. Can you imagine 300% more items than a generation ago? That's kind of crazy, right? Each one of us apparently own 300% more. So why do we do that? And I think you mentioned about the consumer psychology a little while ago. But what would be interesting is to kind of understand, is it possible for us to then start thinking of what is the point? Is there a community that we can actually start having as a resource? And I'm really looking forward to this King's College Swap event, because actually that's exactly the point about having local communities or a one-stop shop where you can get all products that actually have a positive impact. And with inclusive trade, that's one of our things that we've focused on is A, gathering data, B, trying to support small businesses to evidence their impact and thus grow as well as reach consumers, but also provide consumers with the ease. Because I think many of us, as you were saying, because it's difficult, we stop. Because it's too complicated, we don't bother. So wouldn't it be lovely if you had one place where you could find all items that you knew created a positive impact and you could contribute to it, and it wasn't that complicated, right? So I think at the micro level, that's essentially up to us in what we do. But there's a lot of policy and regulation that's being discussed at the moment. And the EU, the UK, we have the Green Claims Code where we're trying to eliminate greenwashing. For example, trying to mislead customers or consumers and saying this is organic or this is ecological when, well, actually, maybe it's just a perfume that sounds or smells like it's ecological, right? So those kind of things are coming at the regulatory element. And I think there's a lot that's happening at the policy level, but these will take time, right? It will take time before policy really starts to become as effective as you'd want it to be. But at the same time, at the level of collaborations, I think one of the things that we were discussing when I was just teaching the other day at one of these schools was about, being really starting to talk about sustainability as a subject. And when I say sustainability, I don't mean just sort of broadly, but you know how we speak about English and maths. Why do we not actually have a core program that looks at the various elements and breaks it down and starts talking about sustainability in the true sense? Get feedback from children, get feedback from the youth, and start to develop an academic program that, in fact, not only at the university level, but at the schools, kids are so perceptive and they absorb everything. So why not utilize that to really start teaching sustainability at that level, or start not just teaching, but actually engaging with sustainability at that level? And as I said, finally, it comes down to us as consumers, right? Eventually, if we don't responsibly use our wallets, we're never going to be able to, we can't just blame the big brands because we're actually doing it ourselves, isn't it? It's a bit like as a kid when your grandma or your mom said, well, do what you would do to others. Why do we not do that? We need to think about, if I don't want the brand to do it, I need to consider what I'm buying today. Don't buy it, right? It's as simple as that. And here's the thought. How about if each of us came up with a green passport, which gave us points on how sustainable have you been, right? And maybe it's the human element, it's social, or it's environmental, or it's something else. I don't know. There are lots of different elements that you could actually think of. But I really like the idea of having a green passport, and I don't mean it. This is not political in any way, please. So there is nothing to do with any color or any country or anything. The green being like, let's have a passport of some sort, which is for humanity, not just for a country. And that's recognized at least by a certain core of countries, or, even a community, to say, how green are you, and let's start gathering those points. So I think what I want to leave everyone here today with, this is a huge problem. Waste management at various levels. There's chemical, mechanical processing. We're discussing how that can all happen. At the policy level, I'm often on panels discussing and advising. But I think at the human level, at the real micro person level, you and I can do a lot. And the whole point of these debates and discussions, I think, is to get us moving, to get us thinking about what is that one thing I'm going to change today. And I'd love for you all to put that down on chat, put it on that Instagram post, put it somewhere and write it down and look at it, because then you'll believe it. So with that, I want to leave you all with that thought. There's a lot I could talk about with sustainability and things that we could do and not do. And I'd be more than happy to share further stories or, the stuff that we're doing today, the investors that we discuss things with. There's a lot to discuss and talk about. But for today, I think that's just a snippet. And I would just, I'd just like to tell everyone, please engage, please collaborate, please use these forums and communities to develop and take this discussion forward. So thank you very much, guys, for having me again today. And please don't forget to engage with us. I would like to hear from you because I think we're all as good as yesterday. So please do engage with us and join us in this big initiative. Let's build this ecosystem together. Thanks so much again for having me today.
Thank you very much.
Back to you.
Now we have our last speaker, 10-15 minutes, and then we have the Q&A. We saved all of your questions for after, don't worry. So our last speaker is Isabella Childs. She's a recent Master of Science graduate from King's College London in Global Health, Social Justice and Public Policy. This past year, she won both first place and Audience Choice Awards with her team at the KTL Policy Idol, with a pitch on confronting waste colonialism through student agency. Over to you, Isabella.
Thank you, Clarice, for that introduction. And I just want to say that it's really interesting to hear everyone's different presentations, and I apologize for any overlap. But I guess it's just good to reinforce all the sort of like important things we're trying to say today. And so, how do we get this? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can confront the problems created by the global fashion industry as individuals and collectively as students. And so the issues with textile waste raised in the seminar are super daunting. So hearing about the social and environmental injustices in places like Cambodia and Ghana, as Sam mentioned, is so alarming and disheartening. So how can we instigate change in this huge and exploitative industry as individuals? And so this is where the power of student agency comes in. And last year, as a master's student at King's, I came across the term waste colonialism through my research for an essay on the health implications of the fashion industry. And I found it to be a very powerful term that encapsulates the historically embedded injustices reproduced by the global fashion industry. So when the UK is sending over 70% of all its disposed clothing overseas, it's imposing the burden of textile waste onto other countries, most often in the global south and former colonies, perpetuating this cycle of oppression and exploitation. And this is waste colonialism, which is when one group uses waste and pollution to dominate another in their homeland. So understanding how this works and what causes it is the first step to confronting the problem. But how can we as individuals and students as a whole begin to tackle this? So we first must understand where our power lies and what our contribution is to the global fashion industry. So young adults are some of the highest consumers of clothing and the main targets of fast fashion advertising. And it doesn't help that many of these ads make claims to sustainability, like the ones on this slide. So greenwashing that fast fashion model. And so an interesting survey I found that has found that 72% of college students have bought fast fashion in the past year, but nearly 2/3 of those surveyed aspire to buy more secondhand fashion to become more sustainable. So there seems to be this dichotomy between wanting to consume the latest trends and also wanting to be sustainable. And the strain between these two can cause a fashion guilt that we've talked about, or worse, we choose to ignore the very harmful impacts that our clothing purchases have and continue to consume at such high rates. Another survey by Vogue Business found that half of Gen Z fast fashion shoppers would continue to buy from places like Boohoo or Pretty Little Thing, despite knowing that these brands violate the working conditions in their factories. So we really need to work to reconcile this strained relationship between striving towards sustainability and the desire to consume. And we're told that clothing makes us feel confident. It allows us to express ourselves and be creative and feel good about ourselves. But we really need to work to become more conscious of how this is impacting other people and the environment. And it really doesn't need to come at the cost of our expression and identity. And Michaela Loach is a student activist who really makes an important point on this. She says that, where is it? She says that if fast fashion is often connected to empowerment. If you wear a great outfit, you feel good, you feel empowered. But if your empowerment is causing the oppression of someone else, is it real empowerment? And it's really vital that our clothing also empowers those involved at each stage of the garment's value chain. So from farmers who are planting cotton seeds all the way to those who are working to recycle discarded garments. And the way we currently engage in fashion is detrimental to others and the environment, as we've seen. And overconsumption creates demand for ever-rising garment production, leading to further waste. And even though most of us are aware of this, the fast fashion culture continues to be the same. And so we have to look at our power as both individuals and collectively as students to speak out and act against waste colonialism. And we have agency to decide what we can do and an ability to influence rather than be the ones who are influenced. And as young people, we are creators of culture and often at the forefront of social and political movements. And with over 3 million students in the UK alone, just about that number, there is a great potential to shift to a more circular economy when it comes to consumption. And so what would this circular economy look like? How would we do it? So first, it's important to look at how our personal relationship to clothes needs to change. Looking at the retailers in Ghana's Kantomanto market, how they're able to salvage up to 30 million items of clothing each month by repairing and upcycling. Imagine how much clothing could be saved if we did this to our own clothes. So extending the life of our garments by 9 months alone could reduce its carbon, water, and waste footprint by 22%. So if we change the relationship we have with what we wear, we will shift our culture from one of disposability to one of circularity. All too often we buy outfits for single occasions or for a season, and then we just get rid of it the next and replace it with something new. And so changing the way we see our clothes is about being more intentional with what we wear and choose to buy. So repairing your favorite jeans or dyeing a t-shirt that needs a new lease of life. These can all prevent these items from going to landfills abroad. And most people have some sentimental pieces of clothing, something that could have been passed down from a previous generation, or your favorite hat that's kept you warm for like the last 10 years. If we've treated all our clothes the same way we treat these cherished items, we would hold on to them, we would repair them, look after them, and we would buy less and waste less. So you don't need to give up your love of fashion or your wallet to do this. Buying more intentionally means you're thinking about the longevity of your garments and how often you will wear them and how much you really love them and think about them before committing to purchasing them. So even looking at my own wardrobe, I think of my favorite clothes, my favorite pieces are the ones that I've repaired the most and hung on to the longest, or were passed down to me. And these are the ones with the most memories and stories to tell. So when you form a deeper bond with your clothes, your urge to replace them is diminished. This is definitely something we can do as individuals to create the change in the direction of true sustainability and reduced consumption. But yes, students have further power in their numbers. So an example of this is I found data that said that 2/3 of us choose to donate clothing each year in the UK. And so that given the average person gets rid of about 11 items, if 2/3 of students they would be getting rid of like about 22 million garments each year. And so this comes to about 11,000 metric tons, which is a crazy number, but to sort of help visualize it, it's about 97 fully loaded Boeing 747 cargo planes, which is a huge number when you think about it. So we really shouldn't underestimate what our small actions can do. And there's so many ways to engage in this movement towards circularity through universities. So there are mending workshops, clothing swaps like the ones we've been talking about, secondhand fashion shows, pop-up shops, awareness building, campaigns, fundraising, volunteering, research projects. So many things all through universities and their networks. And at King's College alone, there is a multitude of societies, events, and campaigns that are all working towards that sustainable goal. And like the module that we're part of now, which is great. And engaging in a range of these actions is an important way of using collective power to challenge systems that continue to uphold that fast fashion model. Advocating for policy change and pushing for academic departments to incorporate social and environmental justice issues in the curriculum can both or all of them lead to more conscious decision making and lead to systemic change both at a local and on a local and global scale. And so to give an example of this, last year I competed, as Clarice mentioned, with two of my friends in the King's annual Policy Idol competition, which is open to all students, undergrad, postgrad research, with a pitch for creating clothing donation points across university campuses and residences. And our aim was to inspire a policy that begins to tackle waste colonialism by reducing the amount of clothes exported out of the UK. And so the garments dropped off in these boxes wouldn't be sent off to some unknown waste facility, but instead kept within the university's community where students could repair, reuse, upcycle clothing in a bunch of different ways. Things like fashion shows and secondhand shops where you could buy items that have been salvaged or creatively altered to give them a new use. And at a local level, this is a small change with a big impact. So starting with your local community is definitely one of the best ways to begin work towards sustainability. I've often pushed a lot of my friends to think twice before buying clothes, new clothes, or trying an alternative such as renting if it's for just a single occasion. And even though it seems like a really small thing to do, I've noticed within my own circle how my friends are breaking these habits of overconsumption. So I really wouldn't underestimate the power of your individual influence because it will inevitably have a knock-on effect. And so before I finish, I just want to highlight that, as Rupa said, that there are so many levels of intervention that are needed to tackle the injustices of the fashion industry and waste colonialism. Governments, policymakers, brands, they all need to step up to truly change the deeply embedded systems that are in place. But don't forget that you also have a place in this system, and you have a lot of power to create change in your community and beyond through your position as a student and individual. So I hope, that gives you a reason to think twice before you buy something next time or get rid of your clothes, and that it motivates you to push more for that change in culture towards a more circular economy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella, and thank you all also in the chat for keeping the chat active, giving so much information, and thank you to all the speakers. The chat is really engaged with everything you said. I have some questions. You can keep them in the coming in the chat. You have all the speakers a lot of thank you from the audience. And first question that was perhaps a bit for you, Sam, from Amy. I was wondering what the journey of the clothing is. If I was to donate clothing to my local trade or Oxfam, let's say, what happens to the clothes if they cannot sell? So a bit, how do these clothes end up in landfill? Do you have a bit of fact about exactly how does it happen?
Hi, thank you so much. I believe my colleague Maddie responded to that comment. So she was a contributor to the report, and we didn't focus so much on the actual charities, but not all charities send clothes to Ghana, as she mentioned. And I think the best thing to do is to just double check with the charities what they do with the clothes that they don't keep. But I think throughout the research we did identify some charities that send clothes to Ghana, but it wasn't the main focus. We were really interested in the impact of the secondhand clothes from Kantamanto across Ghana.
Yeah, and also because the question I think is also, how do these clothes end up here? Is it charity or is it companies? As you mentioned, Kim, some companies now offer to take back the clothes and then give or like a bit of money to the people giving him. So where do these clothes come from? Is it company? Is it NGOs? Or do you know a bit what this cycle is to end up here?
Okay, as in ending up in Ghana specifically. Yeah, okay. So I think we're in an ever global world, and I think there's just so many ways of trading, and unfortunately, there's still so many loopholes when it comes to trade. So it's easy and hard at the same time to know exactly how the clothes get here and through what means, especially because everything is so porous and it's easy to transport things. And I think the fact of the matter is, like, even if the way you look at our beaches in Ghana, like, we got here through a lot of a lack of regulation and a lack of monitoring. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly where, but I think, yeah, charities, you'll also find a lot of middlemen operating within this field, who will gain money from this practice. And so I think you even saw it with when the report came out. There was a bit of conversation because I think people felt targeted, and I think people's businesses, they were worried about how this would impact their own businesses. Yeah, but I see Rupa has a question, maybe a follow-up to, yeah, give more context.
Hey, Sam. No, I just wanted to add, if I could, Clarice, because just something to add there. One of the biggest challenges in sort of cross-border trade is, and we were just discussing this at the WTO, actually at the public forum. This was back in September, October, November last year. And one of the key issues is, when you're trading across borders, every single product has a code. Okay, so which means that everything is defined by what is called the HS coding system, which is an international system of which, for example, everything has, for example, this will be your clothing is either chapter 61 or 62, which is, and there are loads of chapters. So, it goes from 50 to 63 are all textile chapters, whether it's cotton, whether it's yarn, whether it's silk, whether it's polyester, there are all kinds of different things. And then if it's a men's shirt, a women's shirt, a boy's or a girl's, etc. What it doesn't do as yet is actually state categorically whether this is secondhand or whether this is new. It gives you a price. And the thing is that there is something called dumping as well. So basically, when there's an importer in a certain country who is importing textiles is not illegal, right? So you will, like in the UK, we import textiles as well. But it's very hard to distinguish whether this textile is now a second hand or a first hand unless the retailer, the seller actually provides that particular bit of information, but he or she is under no, or they are under no requirement to do so. And these kind of rules are also often determined by the local, sort of the national country as well, in terms of saying whether or not you need to have these customs requirements or not. So it's rather a complex web, to the point that big companies have a problem if they're sending products across borders for repairs as well, because they can't distinguish whether this is a new product and the real customs duty should apply, or whether it's an old product and you're sending it for repair. So this is something that's actually being discussed at some of the highest levels to figure out that, we didn't have this problem in the past, but there is a problem now in terms of how do we distinguish whether something is broken or I mean, I say broken, I don't mean textiles, but like, let's say it's a computer or a phone that requires to be sent somewhere to get repaired and sent back. How do you distinguish whether this is new or old? So this is a problem. So which is why one of the ways in which a lot of the secondhand clothes do reach Africa is through pure actual trade, which is legal. Unfortunately, this is a loophole where you can't always talk about you can't always see whether it's secondhand or firsthand. So it's just wanting to kind of add that piece because it is a huge challenge, which is at the moment still being discussed.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting. I'll jump on to the next question because we don't have a lot of time anymore, and there are so many of them. Just a quick question for Sam again. How is this, meaning the state of the Jamestown beach, impacting the daily lives of the local, for example, fishermen in the area?
Great. Yeah, thank you for that question. I believe Joy asked that, so thanks for asking that. And yeah, it's a very serious problem in Ghana. I think you're seeing the impact on this fast fashion impact on people who have nothing to do with this industry. And so with fishermen, we spent a lot of days with them, kind of following them on the fishing journey. Like, we followed them in a canoe just while they were trying to catch fish, and when they would bring back the nets, it would be covered in textile waste, you know. So they're dealing with this issue. They're also dealing with foreign vessels overfishing in their territory. So it's like they're being attacked on multiple angles. And to see that fast fashion is adding another layer to that struggle has been so heartbreaking, you know. And also, once the fishermen will catch the fish and then they'll give it to fish sellers, we actually witness fish sellers removing waste and plastic from the fish that they're trying to sell. And so when we're talking about microplastics, what are Ghanaians eating? What are they consuming? So I think there's so much to be said. But yes, the fishing community are definitely suffering a lot at the hands of this crisis.
Yeah, and depressing a bit. Another question, there was some debate in the chat and some information, especially from Jane, about the role on influencers. So perhaps Kim, on how, and in particular with the haul and the Shein hauls, and how are influencers doing good or bad with this? And do we see an impact? Has it been researched?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I don't recall research. I mean, it's likely there is some, definitely will be there, but I don't recall any research right at the moment. But well, the role of influencers, social media influencers, is related to the power of social norms. So like people tend to want to conform to the social norms, what's going on in the what others are doing. So we are social beings, we are affected by what other people's doing. So I would definitely agree with influencers' role is huge for changing people's perceptions and behaviors. And because social pressure is a very powerful tool. For example, more consumers are, so some kind of well, there are different social norms, like in descriptive social norms and dynamic social norms, injunctive social norms. And descriptive social norms is, just describing what other people are doing, and dynamic social norms is what is showing that people are changing their behavior. So it's on the move. So I think in terms of influencers on social media, it's related to dynamic social norms, because they can show that it's actually changing right now. So and it's I think it's a thing, telling that this is a thing these days. So yeah, definitely influencers can have powerful impact regarding this, showing the dynamic social norms. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Very interesting. Another question that we had in the chat was Ria, who asked what materials were on clothes made of pre-industrial society, and did these materials have the same detrimental environmental impact? So we saw that a lot of the problem that, and all the clothes that end up in Ghana are plastic made. So what are the options? Perhaps if any of you have like anything to say about what we can do and what was there before our catastrophic situation right now. I don't know if Rupa, Sam, or Isabella, you want to answer that?
I guess I could just take just a quick. Sorry, Isabella, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, please.
Just to say that I think there's both, right? I mean, it depends on how far back in time we're going, because obviously history of fashion, if you go into the fashion industry, will show you that over time, we've had the worst kind of fashion with, arsenic dyes and things like that, like the green color that was, quite popular in the was it Victorian era? I can't remember my history of fashion quite well. But yeah, it basically started killing people, right? It was the Green Death. So, I mean, fashion has had its problems through time. But equally, fashion had, I think, traditional craftsmanship is another element of it, right? So in every point in time, you've had some of the natural products or natural raw materials around you that are used. So you'll have the cottons, the silks, and, natural dyes. But then equally, as soon as the industrialization sort of started, I think we went whole hog and got into dyes and bright colors, and that's where all the problems started. I think that's just sort of a little bit of an input there.
Yeah, I guess like what I was gonna also point out is the social aspect of it, like the historical like oppression of people through, say, like the cotton farming, slavery in the US, that whole globalization of textile production has like its very roots in injustice and really horrible violent history. So it's, yeah, I guess I just want to point that out, that it, like Rupa said, it has always had its issues, and they often are very, like today's issues very much connect to the histories in the past that yeah, sort of prevail to this day. Because I did my dissertation on say like cotton farming and working conditions in India, and very much how that was rooted in India's colonial past and globalization of the cotton trade. So yeah, I think it's very important to look at that sort of like deeply embedded historical context of where our clothes come from and how they're produced today.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's, yeah, a problem of the materials, but also the sheer amount of clothes that we have. And yeah, it's a never-ending problem. I think we don't have time for another question. Thank you all very, very much. All the contact for details for the speakers will be on the slide that we all are also going to give to you. So you could ask those questions to the speakers, and if they have time, then they reply. And I head over now to Rosa to finish the seminar.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just thinking I could probably keep asking you guys questions and listening forever. It's been so, so interesting, honestly. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of our 4 speakers. I think you all brought such different perspectives and angles, and I've learned so much, and I thought I already knew enough about fast fashion. And I just, yeah, obviously, thank you as well to Clarice for moderating and making the seminar a reality. She's been helping us throughout the last few years, and it's yeah, we're incredibly grateful to have such amazing speakers and students and staff here at King's as well. I just wanted to share a few opportunities before you all rush off, I'm sure, to do other things on your Wednesday afternoon. February is our Climate and Sustainability Month, the university. So we've got no seminar in February, but instead we have a whole range of events, and I'll be popping the links in the chat in a moment. So do check it out. Some of them are open to external. Some of them, unfortunately, are only for the King's community. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start of the session, do register on our module and then also register on the sustainability seminar sign-up form, and that is open to the public. So you're more than welcome to join and to share it with friends and family. And obviously you can subscribe to our newsletter and our social medias just to keep up to date with everything happening. So I'll pop those in the chat. And also I wanted to mention, we are running a closed swap next week. Unfortunately, it will only be available to King's staff and students. This is mostly just to manage the numbers. When we've done it publicly, they become really, really big, but we're really hoping to run some collaborative ones, and we're exploring different partnerships to run more clothes swaps and open them up to the public. And it's a 2-day one. I'd also love to say, and I'm sure you always hear this, we would love to get some feedback. I know it takes a couple of minutes to do, but we'd be really grateful. It's just to keep improving these seminars and keep bringing you topics and speakers that you enjoy. So yeah, if you do have a couple of minutes to spare and would like to give us some feedback, that would be really, really amazing. Yeah, I think it goes without saying again, thank you to all the speakers. I mean, everyone in the chat, you might have some time to read it afterwards, is just saying how great it was. And it's been really interesting reading along as we've been going to see that this is a topic that engages everyone. And I think, as someone said before, and has been mentioned, we can all do our little part, right? And together we can make change together, and we can make much more impactful change and not forget, kind of leave anyone out of the climate space. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and enjoy the rest of your days.